Hello again, vets. Rick Seaman here with another segment of the Veterans Nation show on Veterans Network. I'm joined today by Dr. Paula Caplan. Hi, Paula. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Paula is an associate at Harvard University with a degree in psychology. She's worked a lot with veterans over the years, and she's got a new program, and I've got the T-shirt on here. Thank you for the T-shirt. Listen to a vet, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, Paula, you do have a great amount of time spent with veterans, you know, in your background and your profession. Question: how much of that time, if any, has ever been spent inside or nearby or sort of around the VA?
Oh, not very much. I've had people read my book, which is about listening to veterans, and go to their local VA saying, hi, I'm here to just listen to veterans if they want to talk. And for some reason, the people at the VAs are saying, well, we have to screen you, and what's your training? And they're trying to make it look like this is therapy. It so clearly is not. We don't want it to be therapy. We don't think vets need therapy. They need connection and community just like everybody else.
Sure.
And what they don't need is being told, well, you were in the military, maybe you were in combat, and now you've come home and you're having some struggles. That's a mental illness. It's PTSD. It's major depressive disorder. As a psychologist, I have learned from the inside that the whole field of psychiatric labels is not scientific. Everybody thinks it is. So they think, oh, if you get the right label, they'll know how to help you.
Yeah.
Actually, it often gets in the way, because if somebody says to me, I was in combat, or I was sexually assaulted in the military, or even I had a really rough time coming home because of the culture shock,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, why should we say that's a mental illness? Why shouldn't we say those are deeply human reactions?
Sure.
So the two ways that I started working with vets, because I didn't until about 15 years ago, one was I got interested because my late father fought in the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh.
He was captain of an all-black artillery battery.
Oh, wow.
And they were the first black unit allowed to go into battle in the war, and they won a presidential citation for meritorious service.
Nice.
And I loved my father, and he was a wonderful storyteller, but I never could remember what he said about his time at war. And like most veterans, he didn't tell me anything that would worry me, you know, or make him seem heroic. It was how great the guys were. But year after year, he'd tell these stories, and I never could remember them. And I didn't know why. And then one day, somebody videotaped him telling these stories, gave me the tape. I sat in my room, I put it on the VCR, and I started watching, and I thought, oh yeah, those are the same stories. And then I heard him say the words, I was a forward observer. And I had to turn off the machine. I broke down and I wept, because I knew what a forward observer was. And I realized that all these years, that's why those stories hadn't registered, because I couldn't bear to think of my father in danger.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, here, I was a non-veteran growing up in the home of a veteran that I was very close to, but I didn't know so much about him. And that is the case for most non-veterans in this country. I call it the non-veterans' war illiteracy and even military illiteracy.
Sure.
And I think it's very dangerous for this country, because whatever the non-veterans' politics, however they feel about war in general or a particular war, the fact is that veterans are part of this country. They serve in our name, whether we want them going over there or not. They are serving in our name, and we can't have this dangerous divide that happens when veterans come home and they're the veterans over here and then the rest of the community. It's one of the most significant factors leading to veterans' high suicide rates and substance abuse and homelessness.
So, Having heard that, I take it that the VA just doesn't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole, right?
Well, right. I mean, they try to make it look like this is therapy, and it's not.
Right.
It's what we used to call friendship. It's what we call human connection. It's
Yeah.
not psychotherapy where the listener is trying to figure out how to
Right.
diagnose you.
And then you get shipped over to the psychiatric department. Here comes a shopping bag full of pills.
Exactly.
Yes, we know all about
Yeah.
that. We've talked about that on previous shows.
And the shopping bag full of pills is another factor that increases the suicide rate.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I have to say, I know some veterans who say, I love being told I have PTSD. And I say, but that's officially a mental illness. And I don't think if war upset you or being assaulted upset you, I don't think that's a mental illness. That's a human reaction.
Yes.
And we can't call it a mental illness. So I'll say, tell me, why do you want to be described as having PTSD? And they say three things that are perfectly understandable, and it's important. One is, sometimes it's the only way somebody has said to them, I believe that you're suffering. Now that's tragic. I think we should do the radical thing instead of saying, I believe you're suffering. Secondly, they
Yeah.
say, it gets me benefits. Well, of course they deserve benefits, but it shouldn't be dependent on, but you have to let us call you mentally ill first.
Right.
And they get services if they get the diagnoses. Well, some of those services are just what you said, bags full of pills.
Yeah.
Therapy that, I'm a therapist, I can tell you, I am in no better condition to help a veteran with the kinds of things they've gone through than members of the community who are listening. That doesn't mean that a veteran shouldn't have the right to go to a therapist. It doesn't mean that some therapists aren't helpful. Some are very good. But the fact that you're a therapist isn't what tends to make you helpful to a veteran. It's more, are you respectful? Do you really listen? Are you supportive? And do you say what you're experiencing is not a sickness, it's
Right.
deeply human.
Right. So it sounds like what you've done with this Listen to a Vet project, that you've begun this program, is now you're taking a new angle.
Yes.
You're taking a new angle. Tell us about the program, Listen to a Vet.
Okay, well, I'll tell you how it got started. I was going to write a book about it, and I did, about veterans, but I thought, I don't really know much about veterans, and so what should you do when you don't know? You should listen. So the first time I met with a veteran, I just listened to her, and she taught me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I listened to a Vietnam veteran. This was about 15 years ago. We sat in a Starbucks. He talked for 3 hours.
Wow.
I didn't ask him questions because I didn't know what were the right questions to ask. I thought, I'm here to let him talk, say what he wants to say, and I'm here to just listen with respect. And you know what? When I did these listening sessions, I would get emails from the vets the next day saying things like, last night I slept for the first time since I got back
Wow.
from Vietnam,
Oh.
from Iraq, right? And it would move me to tears.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if it's that powerful and positive just to listen, what does that say about our society? People don't listen to each other.
Sure.
They don't listen to vets. You know what non-veterans say to me? They say, well, I understand you're doing something with vets, and I would really like to help, but you know they're all mentally ill with PTSD, and I'm not a therapist, so there's nothing I can do.
Oh, dear.
And then when I say, actually, there's something you can do, and it's not a mental illness, you can just listen.
Listen.
And then they say, well, but I might say the wrong thing. And I say, no, you're not going to say the wrong thing because you're not going to
Nothing.
say anything. You really,
Nothing.
right, you really just listen.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, how can that help? And I say, you will be amazed within about the first 5 minutes. When you are listening respectfully and with your whole heart, both you and the vet connect very quickly. And the veteran knows it's a safe place to say whatever they
You got
want to
this
say.
going on.
Yes, exactly. You have this eye contact.
Yeah.
And because you're not saying, what's a butter bar? You're not interrupting to ask for definitions.
Right.
You're not even saying, oh, that was really brave. Because the vet might be feeling like, no, I only saved 2 of my buddies, not 5. It wasn't brave, right? So it's not our position as the listener to comment. Our position is to be quiet, listen with respect, because we want to just clear the path for the vet to say whatever they want to say.
Right.
So that was why it's officially called the Welcome Johnny and Jane Home Project.
Yes.
And we listen to a vet from any era, combat or not. We also will listen to a vet's loved one instead of a vet, or in addition, one at a time.
That's great.
And we have just been amazed at the kinds of consequences, because we can't promise anything. Everybody's individual.
Right.
We don't know if you're going to do a listening session with me. I don't know what the effects are going to be. But we did a study at Harvard Kennedy School. We listened to vets from World War II to the present, and every single one of them said they've never been given a chance to do this. It was so positive for them. And a month later, we thought, well, what if they have more nightmares or more flashbacks? They didn't. They felt better. Can I give you a couple of examples of outcomes?
Oh, please,
Okay.
please.
All right. Well, a couple really, really quickly. One woman said she'd never had a chance to do this before. She did a listening session with my mother, who was about 89 at the time.
Now, your mother was the listener.
And she was the listener, that's
Okay.
right. And this woman had been one of the first women in a particular unit of the Air Force, and she had a really rough time in a lot of ways, and she was physically injured as well. And she'd never had a listening session. And she came out of that session feeling like at last she had had a chance to speak the truth, and she felt so empowered by that. She used the term, she made up the word, and lifted, that she started writing. She's writing a novel, she's
Oh, my
writing a
God.
screenplay, she has an idea for a project for women veterans. That was one example. A couple of others real quickly. There was a guy who was at a 2-year college, and he was married and had a couple of kids. And the college didn't have a program that he really wanted to study. He went to see the guy who was in charge of veterans for his college. And remember, the guy's in charge of veterans, but he did a listening session for the first time with this veteran, and the listener said, I learned so much about what it's like to be a veteran on this campus. So just think, he was in charge, but how little he knew
Oh, yeah.
till he listened.
Amazing.
And that the veteran asked for a second session, and he felt so enlifted
Yeah.
that he went out, he applied for a full scholarship at a 4-year university where they had the program he wanted. He got it. He and his wife and kids moved, and he's doing that program now. And then the last example I want to give you, and I'm really careful. We don't promise to prevent suicide. But this was so unexpected. I gave a talk to a very small group one night, and a guy came up to me afterward, and he said, I'm a Vietnam combat vet. And he said, the way I've dealt with my trauma for all these decades is I have listened to other vets. And now I'm ready for somebody to listen to me. So I said, hold on. There was a woman who had just told me she wanted to be a listener. They were in the same community, didn't know each other. I connected them. A couple weeks later, I got emails from them both saying, thank you for connecting us, and we did it, and it was great.
Wow.
And that was it. But about 8 months later, I ran into the veteran, and he said, I have to tell you something. He said, leading up to that listening session, for a very long time, I was seriously planning to kill myself. And he said, since that listening session, not once have I felt suicidal. So we underestimate in this country how much that simple, respectful connection can mean.
Yeah. And it makes so much sense to me, Paula, to be there. And you choose locations that are just someone's home or in a park or
Yeah, it
wherever you can put them
Public
together.
library, a
Right.
place of worship. You just need a quiet room.
Right.
The sessions are private. They're free.
Right.
Nobody records. Nobody even takes a note.
No video.
No video.
It's private
It's private.
between the listener and the veteran.
That's right.
And, it just makes sense because, I could see myself, at various periods in my lifetime, as a combat vet. But in any case, I could see myself just gradually becoming comfortable, just scratching little surfaces about military service. And by watching the listeners, that eye contact, I could see how that could bring more out of me,
Yes. Yes.
and then, I would probably feel more comfortable telling, more darker things that I experienced in the military and combat. And then at the same time, I could see myself reading that person's eyes and to go, oh boy, maybe I'm going too deep here. I could see, you could read, the concern and the alarm in someone's eyes when you start going down the ladder
Yes.
to the darkest depths of this whole business. But that to me is cool because really the veterans running the show.
You are so right, and I'm so glad you said that, because for some veterans have said, well, I don't want to do that because they wouldn't be able to take what I might say.
Yeah.
But you know what? We haven't lived through it. Yes, we can take it. The least we can do is listen respectfully and bear witness.
Yep.
It's the least we should be doing. I think it's our civic responsibility. The other thing is, I'll tell you, the vet doesn't get more upset or into darker things than they choose to do.
Exactly.
And so, what people have said, well, what if they get triggered, that terrifying word? Well, you're in charge. It's not like something's going to happen to you or be done to you.
Right.
You choose to talk about whatever you want to talk about, and if you don't want to go a certain place, you don't go there. And I also want to tell you, we did some research. We asked the listeners, how was it for them? And almost everyone says something like this. Well, I decided to do it to do a good deed for a vet, but I was kind of worried, what if I get secondary trauma, that sort of thing. And I want to say, they lived through it,
Is
at least.
that like secondhand smoke?
Yeah. I mean, come on. And I also want to say, do you ever watch a war movie on TV? Do you ever play a violent video game? So let's listen to people who've been through it, and give them our understanding and our time. But then every listener has the experience that some of them hear really terrifying and disturbing things. Some don't. It depends on the vet. But the ones that do say, yes, I heard some devastating things. I don't know how they survived it. But you know what? The overwhelming feeling that the listeners have is so positive and so powerful.
Yeah.
So you know what they say? They say, this person has confronted matters of life and death and moral anguish in ways that I have never had to. So in listening to them, I learned more about the veterans' humanity and therefore more about my own. And when they started saying this, you know what I thought? Yeah, veterans are the forward observers for the rest of us to life and death and moral anguish.
Well said, Paula. Well spoken, and that is truth. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Paula Caplan.
Do you really want to help a veteran come home?
The isolation is tough. Just lend an ear.
Anyone can do it.
Do more than just say thank you for your service.
Listen to a veteran.
Do it for yourself.
Do it for a veteran.
Do it for America.
A public service from the Welcome Johnny and Jane Home Project, pairing a veteran from any era with a non-veteran who will simply listen with respect and with their whole heart. ListenToVeterans.org.
All right, nice PSA there.
Thank you.
Back here with Paula Caplan. I was thinking during the break, is it difficult, or maybe you have a good method here, but when you're recruiting these people to be listeners, how do you discipline them or police them to listen to this session and not say anything?
Yeah,
I mean, that's got to be tough.
That's a great
do you
question.
have a process for that?
Well, here's what I tell them. You can probably tell I tend to talk a lot myself, but when I started this whole kind of work, as I said, I was just listening because I didn't have anything worth saying, and I needed to learn. What happens is that even people who say, oh, I know I won't be able to shut up, I say you will be amazed because in our everyday interactions, we're so used to having you talk, then I talk, and then I'm thinking, when should I jump in, and what should I say, and what's the wrong thing to say, and what's waiting too long, and what's. None of that even applies.
Right.
The instructions are so simple. There's a sentence that the non-veteran starts the session with, and then except for one more sentence, and I'll tell you what those sentences are, except for one more sentence that they may say, their job is to just listen with respect and with their whole heart. And when the instructions are that simple, and when they know that the aim is to clear the way so that the veteran can say what they need to say,
Right.
then all of the burden of the responsibility of what to say and when is off of them. It's a tremendous relief.
I think I'd like that.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And then what happens is, once they start listening and they see how it sets the vet free to
Yeah,
talk,
right.
then, boy, as a listener, you're really motivated just to listen.
Right.
So the
What are the sentences?
Yeah, the sentences are, and I should say that both of these sentences were composed bit by bit based on what veterans have told us.
Right.
So if you and I were going to do a session, this is the sentence that I start it with. I say to you, as an American, I take some responsibility for what you experienced in the military and trying to come home. And if you want to talk, I will listen for as long as you wish to speak, and I will not judge. Right? And then I just listen, but I listen with my whole heart and 100% of my attention. The only other time that I speak is if the veteran at some point tells me about some devastating experience they've had and says something about how it continues to affect them now. And then I say, and again, this is because of what we've learned is important to veterans to hear, then I would say, if I had experienced what you've just described, I'm sure that, like you, I would be having flashbacks or insomnia or whatever it is. And I hope you know that's a deeply human reaction. It's not a mental illness, and you're not crazy.
Now, this is what you instruct the listeners with.
Yes.
So they're taking a little mini lesson in psychology here,
Well,
entering into this, right?
I don't think it's psychology. I think it's human interaction.
Right.
Because, I mean, it's the psychologists who are always saying everybody's mentally ill. It's the rest of us, including myself,
Right.
Who need to be saying, let's stop saying everything's a mental illness. It's not helpful. And if calling you mentally ill did help in some way, I would say, well, then let's consider it. But it doesn't. What helps is to say, you were in Vietnam, you just told me something you went through. Of course you have nightmares. Of course you keep thinking about it. That's human. Now, that creates a connection between us. And it also, so many veterans have been told they're mentally ill because, oh, you have this or that diagnosis. Or even if they haven't been told that, I cannot remember how many have said to me, you know, I'm home and I'm safe, and I don't know why I hit the ground when I hear a truck backfire. I know I'm crazy. And I say, why does that make you crazy after what you've been through?
I do it all the time.
Of course.
Yeah.
But of course you do. And I don't think that in this very psychiatrized country we live in, we don't spend enough time saying to each other, whether it's veterans or other people, after what has happened to you, of course you feel that way. Because here's what happens. You're a veteran, something is haunting you or something is troubling you. Now, if instead of saying, of course it is, I get that, instead of that, if I say, that's a mental illness, all right, now, in addition to whatever else was going on for you, now you've got this enormous added burden of feeling like, oh, and I'm damaged. Something is wrong with me. I should have been over it by now. I'm weird. I'm nuts. Why do we commit such? I think these are emotional crimes, and I think they're moral crimes that we commit by not telling people who have suffered that you are having a human reaction and you're not crazy.
I couldn't agree more. I think it sounds like a great program. You've got a website.
Yes.
And I encourage any veterans that want to participate in this program. And this can be arranged anywhere in the country.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Yeah. You just get on the website, make the connection,
We'll let you know what to do.
and they pair you up with a listener.
Yeah. Or we tell listeners how to locate veterans in their communities.
Okay.
Or I got a call from somebody in the Deep South, a veteran, and she wanted to have a listening session. I didn't have a listener there, but I had one in New Jersey. They did it by Skype. You can't do it on the phone because the silence is not a good thing on the
Yeah,
phone.
yeah.
But you can do it by Skype or you can do it in person.
Sure, Skype makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The website is,
Listen, numeral 2, veterans.org.
give us that again.
Listen to veterans.org. And I want to say that veterans who want to help with the project, they need to have a listening session first so they can say to other veterans, I had it. That veterans are always saying, it's like somebody just lifted 2 boulders out of my rucksack. It puts you in a position to say to other vets, I did it.
I did,
I
yeah.
can recommend it. But veterans can also help in other ways. Even if they don't feel they're suffering, they can have a listening session to help reduce the non-veteran listeners' illiteracy about the military and war. So for some veterans, they do a listening session as a way to continue to serve. And then they can help promote the PSAs. We want every American non-veteran to learn you can go beyond saying, thank you for your service. You can actually listen to a veteran. We have a film called Is Anybody Listening? We have a song composed by Emmy winner
Covering all
Patricia Lee
bases here.
Stoddard, right? And so they can help in a lot of ways.
And you've got a book here, Paula.
Yes.
Let's hold that up here.
Okay, sure.
Let's just see what we got.
It's When Johnny and Jane Come Marching Home, How All of Us Can Help Veterans.
Is this my copy?
Yes, it's
Oh!
for you. It's for you. Yeah.
And
yeah.
so I get a book,
Yeah.
I get a T-shirt. This has been a good day for me. I want you to read the back of the T-shirt, okay? You ready? Give me a shot here.
The great anthropologist Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world.
Okay.
And the rest of the quote is, it's not on there, but she says, indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
All right, so you got a cool T-shirt. You got a book that has won 3 national awards for nonfiction. Mm-hmm. And you also have a poem that you told me about from a book of poetry written by a Vietnam veteran. Is that correct?
That's right. His name is David E. Jones,
Okay.
and 11 Bravo vet from Vietnam. And he lives in Southern California. And his book is called A Soldier's Story, The Power of Words.
Uh-huh.
And I think, frankly, that the reason that the book, my book, won these awards is that his poetry is interwoven all through the book.
Oh,
so I
okay.
talk about what it's like to be in the military, what it's like to be at war. I talk about a lot of things. And then I talk about what it's like to have someone listen to you. And he wrote a poem that ends in the following way, and it's about how it feels when somebody who's not a veteran just listens to you. He says,
You know I'm going to ask you to recite this.
okay, the poem ends this way. Directions I do not provide with this. You only need a heart. And if you understand a vet, you've made a small, small start.
Perfect. Paula, thank you for spending some time with us.
My pleasure.
Vets, thank you for joining in. Check it out, go to the website, and you may find this helpful, and or you know somebody that may find this helpful, and spread the good word. That's all we ask. Okay? Vets, thank you for your service. Welcome home, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Is everybody listening? Can you hear me if I speak? Is everybody listening? Can
wasn't good. I live alone in silence here in your neighborhood. Will I hurt you, make you hate me? Will you think I'm insane?